Welcome in, everybody, to my 10 takeaways from Week 5 of the 2021 CFL season. Really quickly, before we get started, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting the like button and subscribing to Ozzy's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. I really appreciate it. It really helps me out. And with that said, let's get into talking about the Labor Day weekend that we just witnessed. Man, so great to be back at a CFL game this week. First time in over 2 years for me. I was at the TICATS ARGOS game. Great atmosphere. Cannot wait to go to the rematch on Friday. And honestly, what a weekend that we just witnessed. Probably the most exciting football that we've seen so far this season. And I'm just really excited to get into today's takeaways. And without further ado, let's start it off with number 1. The right matchup at the right time for Montreal. So Montreal could not have asked for a better opponent this week as they look to avoid a 3-game losing skid. Jake Wieneke and Eugene Lewis have really emerged as one of the best receiving duos in the league really early this season. They were able to really reestablish William Stanback after he was shut down by Hamilton in Week 4, which is super important for the pacing of this offense, which isn't the strongest in the short to intermediate passing game. Really good down the field, but not so much in the short to intermediate passing game. But the most important thing about this game was that Vernon Adams Jr. got in rhythm early with those shorter passes that, like I said, they're not the best at completing, but he was able to get that going early in this game, to get the pacing going, and to open up those deep balls down the field. And then he really unleashed a fury of those on his way to 4 touchdown passes in this game. It was just a really, really impressive game from a Montreal offense standpoint. And they gave up 29 points to Ottawa, but I'm not reading too much into that because, Montreal's defense already had one foot on the bus by the second half of this game. So really great performance offensively by Montreal. It's just what they needed. It was the right opponent at the right time. If you asked them after their last loss, who would you want to play the next week? They probably would have said Ottawa, who's really struggling right now on offense, but we'll get to them with number 2. Ottawa's defense is beginning to unravel. As well as the defense had played for the REDBLACKS prior to this week, they were just playing terrible against Montreal. There's just no getting around it. Among the problems that I saw was really horrible tackling all around, especially by this linebacking core. Avery Williams had probably his worst game I've seen from him in a few years, even though he's usually one of the most sure tacklers in the CFL. And I'm also seeing a lack of awareness by these defensive backs in coverage. They were just getting burned time and time again. Randall Evans had an especially poor game in the secondary, being burnt several times. There was a couple of occasions where he was just getting run over in the run game too. Missed tackles. Again, just a big problem in this game for the REDBLACKS. I think those were the primary 2 problems that I saw. Not much of a pass rush either, honestly. I think this defense has begun to feel demoralized by this poor offensive output over the first month of the season. And we really saw the pipes burst open in that regard this week. Number 3. Davis gives Ottawa a better chance to win, but that isn't saying much. So Dominic Davis, long story short, replaces Matt Nichols pretty early in this game after Matt Nichols throws an interception and just really struggles to get the offense moving the first 3 games of the season. And it's hard to blame the REDBLACKS for pulling the trigger on that move right now. Davis comes in, he immediately leads them to a touchdown drive, and he ends up putting multiple scoring drives together, which is really impressive considering how poorly this offense was playing previously. But at the same time, I really don't trust this offense going forward, and I really don't trust Dominic Davis, even though he does give this team a better chance to produce. The reason why he gives this team a better chance to produce is because he can actually move a bit behind this really poor offensive line that's just constantly outmatched by basically every opponent they've seen so far this season. And Davis obviously brings that athleticism. He has a more lively arm, can make more of the throws than Matt Nichols was not making so far this season. But at the same time, this guy makes some of the worst decisions I have seen from a CFL quarterback. There's just so many plays that he gets away with. Despite the couple of interceptions that he did actually throw in this game, there was a couple that he even got away with then. And I really don't have much confidence in this offense to really fix things. I think they should start Dominic Davis going forward just because he gives them somewhat of a fighting chance to move the ball because they can't protect the quarterback, so they might as well have someone around there that can move around back there. But honestly, I don't think his decision-making is up to par, despite the fact that he's been in the league for 3 or 4 years now as a backup. And I'm really not confident in this Red Blacks offense going forward, and it's not saying much that he gives them a better chance to win, because I don't think they're really going to be a contending team this year regardless, because this offense is just so poor in terms of the personnel around them. And honestly, I think it's kind of trending towards a lost season for Ottawa. Number 4, Winnipeg's defense is still king. So I just want to start off by saying that I truly believe that Willie Jefferson is, without a doubt, the most impactful non-quarterback in the entire league right now. He's just a freak-like player, can, get hands in passing lanes. That's one thing he does especially well, more than I think I've seen from any player, NFL or CFL, just the ability to do that as a defensive end. But he's also just so quick. He is one of the best pass rushers. He's just a matchup nightmare for whoever is trying to block him as a tackle at the CFL level. These tackles just cannot compete with this guy's athleticism. And really, Saskatchewan was really outmatched in this regard, like any team would be. We've seen it against Hamilton, where Winnipeg has really won this matchup consistently. And we've seen it again against the Riders in this game. It was just a dominant performance all around by this Winnipeg defensive line. And Jefferson is honestly the biggest component of that. But also, you got to give credit to Jackson Jeffcoat, who's just not equally, but really, really good defensive end as well. One of the better run-stuffing defensive ends in the league. And he's also a great pass rusher in his own right. And so I think that this defense is really the driving force behind this team. They really set the tone up front, and they allow this defensive back room to really play with confidence. You see guys like Dietrich Nichols playing so well so far in his early CFL career. You got Brandon Alexander, who's playing the best football I've ever seen from him. He had the pair of interceptions in this game. But it's really that pressure up front that's really dominating so far this season. And it's really carrying over from that 2019 unit. And that's the main reason I think that Winnipeg is really seeing a big carryover of success from 2019. Number 5, the Riders will be fine, including Cody Fajardo. I know a lot of people are freaking out about the Riders, calling them kind of frauds so far this season after they really got exposed offensively against Winnipeg. But I honestly still have so much confidence in this team going forward. Quarterback Cody Fajardo really did have his worst game as a starting quarterback in the CFL in this game. It was a pretty brutal performance, but like I said in the previous takeaway, this defensive line is just a matchup nightmare for basically any offensive line that we've seen so far play in the CFL this season, especially with line play just down across the league on the offensive side of the ball. And I think Fajardo will really learn from this game. I think it will just take a couple throws next game to really get him to shake that off. And you got to remember that this guy hasn't played that many games. At least he hasn't started this many games at the CFL level yet. He's only played, like 25 games as a CFL starter? And we got to remember that when we're judging this guy. I think, don't get me wrong, it was a terrible performance by the Rough Riders in this game. It was really pathetic offensively. But you got to remember also that they're missing Shaq Evans, their number 1 receiver, who is so important for this offense vertically. He does a lot of things in the all-around game. He has great chemistry with Fajardo, is really an outlet guy for him. And having him on the field with Kyron Moore, who's more of that short area quickness guy, who I think he had like 10 catches in this game. He's a really good player, but he's not a guy that you're going to rely on to be your number 1 receiver. I'm sorry to say, but I think they really need Shaq Evans back, who's still recovering from his injury. I think once he gets back, they're going to be fine offensively. I think just in select matchups like they had against Winnipeg, they're going to struggle because they don't have the offensive line personnel to block a good defensive line right now. And I think that they also played well enough on defense to win this game. It's just their offense really wasn't producing. So I think the Riders will be fine going forward. I think it's just one game. They might lose next week against Winnipeg, and I still would think pretty highly of this team going forward. I think that they're going to be much more competitive next week as they go into Winnipeg. They're really going to have a chip on their shoulder going into that game. I don't know if they're going to win. I think there's going to be a lot better of a performance from this offense, and we're going to have to see how they do in that game. Number 6. The TICATS have regained their 2019 form. Going back to 2019, the TICATS went 15-3, and they really had this mojo going all season where basically they're getting all these contributions from all three different phases, special teams even. They're getting big returns in the return game from guys like Frankie Williams and Brandon Banks. They're getting big plays from the receiving core. They're getting contributions from the running game. The offensive line playing really well. And the defense was really setting the tone for the entire thing. And we really saw this on Labor Day against Toronto. I was at the game. It was electric. They're one of those teams that really does feed off the home crowd. I think more so than almost every team in the entire CFL. When they're playing at Tim Hortons Field, they're just a different vibe. They're an okay road team, but they're a great home team for the most part. And I think Hamilton being at home, it really made a big difference for them. Having Dylan Wynn back at defensive tackle, along with Ted Laurent, and having that front four with Ja'Garrett Davis and Julian House there at the ends, really made a big difference. They really dominated Toronto up front almost the entire day. The defensive backs looked great. And of course, you got a guy like Frankie Williams that had an amazing return and played really well at that field side corner spot. Just a really good game all around from the Tiger Cats, and I was really impressed. Dane Evans looks like the real deal at quarterback. He's like 10-2, I believe, in his 12 CFL starts or so like that, something like that. The offensive line, that was the biggest improvement I saw from this team in this game. It looked miles better, and honestly, the offensive line was a train wreck the first 3 games of the season, but they really upped their game in this game, and I think playing at home is a big factor in that. I think their communication was a lot better and things like that. I think the Tiger Cats have really rediscovered that mojo. They've won a couple games in a row. Now we're going to see if they can really put the hammer down on Toronto when they go for the rematch on Friday. Number 7. The Argos fed the wrong running back versus the Tiger Cats. So there's many potential things to take away from the Argos' awful performance versus Hamilton. One of those things was just discipline, man. There were like 3 post-whistle penalties that really hurt the team's field position in this game, especially on special teams. And no, I don't think one of those takeaways that you can take away from this game is that the Argos are considering making another switch at quarterback. I just don't see it at this point. I think that Nick Arbuckle, yes, he did not have a good game in this game, but I think it was just an all-around terrible performance from all facets of this team. The pass rush wasn't really alive on defense. The defensive backs were blowing coverages. There was that one huge touchdown to Tim White that they gave up. And I think that one thing that really stood out to me when you look at the box score post-game and when I was actually witnessing this game firsthand was how little they handed the ball off to rookie running back DJ Foster, who was a star in Week 3 versus Winnipeg. He only received 3 carries in this game compared to 9 for starting running back John White. Now, John White, he's a very veteran running back, but it just looks at this point that DJ Foster looks like the more explosive of the two. And in this game, where they were really struggling to create big plays, and they were really committing to the running game throughout the game, I think it would have been better served for them to feed Foster in this game, who's just a more elusive runner and explosive runner than John White at this point. And John White really didn't do much with those carries, didn't really break off any big plays. They did use DJ Foster in the receiving game. I think he had like 5 catches and like 7 or 8 targets or so. But I thought that it was wrong for Toronto to not continue to ride with him after how much he really produced against Winnipeg in Week 3, where he really did look like a potential CFL star. We'll see if that trend continues with Toronto's backfield going forward. But I really think that was a mistake by Ryan Dinwiddie from the play calling perspective. Like I said, plenty of things to take away from Toronto in this game, but that really stands out to me. Number 8. Edmonton's offense finally lived up to preseason hype. So what can you say about Edmonton? They looked leaps and bounds better offensively than they did the first couple of weeks of the season. They looked a little bit better against BC in Week 3, but they looked amazing in this game, and they looked like the loaded personnel group that we thought we were going to get early on this season. I thought this team had the best offensive personnel in the entire league when you consider the receiving core, the quarterback, the offensive line. I thought it had it all. And it finally came together on Labor Day against Calgary. A 4-touchdown performance from Trevor Harris, nearly 400 yards passing, was hitting balls deep. He was hitting balls in the intermediate game. And he just looked so comfortable out there. The offensive line looks much, much better especially since Kyle Saxlib came back, who's just a really good young offensive lineman in my opinion. And then James Wilder at running back just looks like the league's best closer down the stretch late in games. This is 2 games in a row where he's really taken over in the fourth quarter, late in game to kill clock. He had a couple really big runs against BC late in that game to really grind out the clock and finish off that game. And he did the same against Calgary, where he had just a beast run when Edmonton was backed up in their own territory, in their own red zone. So it was really impressive to see that from this offense. And there's just contributions from everyone across this receiving core, including Darrell Walker, who was recovering from COVID. And he really played like a star in this game. He had a great catch deep down the field in this game that really was a big turning point late in this game. And honestly, I was just super impressed by Edmonton's offense in this game. This is the offense I thought we were going to get when I was reviewing this team in the offseason. And we'll have to see how this team continues to build on that as we go into the Labor Day rematch next week against Calgary. But I was very impressed with this game, and we'll see if it continues going forward. But this is just a classic Trevor Harris peak performance, who, honestly, Trevor Harris, if you want to talk about the highest ceiling of any quarterback in the league, he might just have it. But the problem is, do you get it every week? And that's the question going forward. Can he keep this up? But good stuff from the Elks. Number 9. The drops by Calgary's wide receivers are beginning to sink the team. So one thing that really stood out to me in this game, and the last couple weeks with Calgary, as they have sunk to a CFL worst 1-4 record, is the fact that these receivers are just not hanging on to the ball. They're getting open, but they're just not hanging on to the ball. Especially Markeith Ambles, who looks like he's going to have a great season, but it could be even better. He could be one of the best receivers in the league. If this guy can catch the routine passes, and I'm not even talking about ones that are in traffic, he's missing ones that are just clear crossing routes across the field. He's looking upfield before he even secures the ball. And there were a couple of occasions like that in this game that really sunk drives for Calgary, and that really was a turning point in this game. I think that if they were able to secure those catches, they would have been able to sustain more drives and ultimately put more points on the board on this game. And this is starting to become a very troublesome trend here for Calgary, because you see guys like Hergy Mayala, who had a really brutal drop last week against Winnipeg, even though they were able to get into field position late in that game despite his mistake. Just, you can't have these kind of mistakes on a consistent basis. And I've seen this more from Calgary than any other team so far this season. Just drops in crucial moments. I'm not too sure if they lead the league in drops, but I'm pretty sure that they're near the top of the league so far this season. And they're really dropping the ball in crucial moments, and it's really hurting this football team that's really playing better than its 1-4 record shows. I think that this team could really go on a run the second half of the season if they can clean that kind of stuff up. But just a really disappointing performance by these receivers who have talent. They are getting open, but they're just not securing the ball and making the easy plays. And I'm very disappointed in that. And I think that Calgary should be very disappointed in the receiving group right now, because they're just not getting the job done on a consistent basis. Number 10. This year's playoff race likely comes down to the wire. So as we just wrap up week 5 here, we can start taking a look at the playoff picture as it's starting to form here. Now 9 games or so left in the season for every team. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out going forward. You have a 3-way tie atop the East, with Hamilton, Toronto, and Montreal all being at 2-2. And then Ottawa at 1-3. The only team I really think that's out of it there for the first place, I don't think Ottawa's really going to make a push. I just don't see the explosiveness on offense, but I talked about that earlier in this video and in many other videos. But I think that, honestly, I can see any of those 3 teams really making a run. I think Hamilton is the clear favorite right now, given the fact that they just beat Toronto and they just beat Montreal. And we'll see if they can continue that in week 6 against Toronto as they go into BMO Field. But I think that's going to be a very interesting race. Ultimately, though, I think the big question is who's going to make it out west. You have Winnipeg at 4-1. I don't think Winnipeg is in any danger of going on some crazy losing streak. I think they just match up too well with many of these teams in the league. And then Saskatchewan at 3-1. I've chosen to take the optimistic view in this video, but I could see why other people would think that maybe Saskatchewan is ripe to go on a skid here and lose multiple games in a row, which would open the door for Edmonton, BC, not necessarily Calgary because they've really dug themselves a hole at 1-4, to really jump into the race right now for the second place in the West. But I think the real question is, who is going to miss out on the playoffs this year? So Ottawa, I think for sure, is not going to make the playoffs. I really don't see it. I think that they just don't have the offensive personnel, like I said. But then I really can't rule out any of these teams. I think Calgary, despite the fact they're 1-4, they're really not playing like a 1-4 team. They're really producing on offense. They're just not putting the ball in the end zone. BC, I haven't been overly impressed with them, even though they do get Ottawa again this week. I'm really interested to see how they do in that game again. And then Edmonton, who's really starting to round into form, winning these last 2 games after starting 0-2. But is there going to be a crossover this year? That's a big question. As we start seeing these divisional games start to play more of a heavy focus in the schedule, we'll have to see how the records are effective and if the math works for the West to have a crossover this season like they have had in many years in recent seasons. So we'll have to see how that works out, but I think it's really going to be a great playoff race this year, especially because of its shortened season and the fact that it's a more divisionally focused schedule. I think any team can really go on a run here if they can just string a few games together and start producing on offense. I think a lot of these teams can really get back into the race and find a way to compete for the playoffs this season, and it's going to be a really great race to see. And with that said, that is going to be the end of today's video, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting the like button and subscribing to Uzzy's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. Be sure to let me know in the comments section, what teams do you see missing out on the playoffs this year? I really want to hear what you guys think in the comments. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.